All right, so thank you everyone for coming to our first online lunch and learn about how to be a good online student. So talking today, we have Jamie Mayo-Bosch, who is a program coordinator / research with kind of IPHRC and exec education. We have Martin Boucher, who leads the online MPA program, is also an instructor at U of S. And we have Emmy, is it Newells or Niles? Newells, who is the manager of the distance programs over at the U of S, the Genie program, and also helps with the online MPA program. So I think, do you guys just want to start about what your best tips are for being an online student? Why don't you start, Jamie?
Sure thing. So yeah, maybe we'll just start with one or two things, then we can get into a few more details. But I know students are looking for just kind of a few quick tips or top tips to take away. And I think for my kind of top tip that I would say, I just actually finished a master's degree all by distance. And so I think one of the things that we all struggle with, and especially in this age of COVID where people have all kinds of things, like Martin was saying, you've got your kids at home, you've got a lot of different things going on, is time management. So for myself, one of the strategies that I've found most effective is the idea of just making yourself go ahead and do schoolwork for a block of time. So this isn't just for online education, but really when you're doing these asynchronous pieces and trying to be self-directed. Sometimes it's called a Pomodoro, I guess, because there was little tomato-shaped timers that people used to use, but just putting on a timer on your phone or whatever it is for a certain amount of time. Maybe using some software to block your ability to access social media or other things that might be a distraction. I personally just throw my phone across the room so I can't grab it anymore if it's not in my hands reach. And then just setting that timer, whether it's for 25 minutes, which is a traditional Pomodoro, or if you're more dedicated, I usually try and do 45 minutes or an hour, and just focus on doing schoolwork for that amount of time. It's much easier to motivate yourself if you know you can stop after a certain amount of time than if you sit down and say, like, I have to write this essay now, or I have to go through this whole online course, or whatever it is. If it's about the process rather than the product you have to come up with. That's my first kind of quick tip, is just setting aside pieces of time every day, short pieces of time, focusing on getting that done. And often you'll find once you get into something, you'll end up going further than that period of time. But if you don't, that's fine. You can just stop and go take a break, do something else, but trying to dedicate that time.
What about you, Martin? What do you think are kind of your top tips for success that you've seen with students?
Yeah, well, from a personal perspective, I share a lot of what Jamie was saying. Actually, I use the 25-minute, 5-minute off Pomodoro method pretty much every day. My headphones on. Also, write a schedule out. That's what I've been doing since I've been home. I write a schedule, plan what my goals are for the day. Have my 25 minutes. So like, I think a little bit what Jamie was getting at that I would sort of build on is kind of being a bit more intentional about your learning. And I think that's what I really like the most about online education. So I as well have a master's degree in online education. I've been involved in online education for probably about 10 years. And I much prefer the online space because I find over time, and when I've worked with students, initially it's really kind of difficult. They're really overwhelmed. They don't know what to do. But then after you get over that hump, I find what happens with students, and what certainly happened with myself, is they become incredible independent learners, right? They really take ownership of their learning. And I think, for the students here, they've been sort of foisted in, forced, if you will, into this particular situation. So it may be kind of hard to persuade you of some of those kind of opportunities, but I think in the long run, that's sort of the nice piece with online learning that I find, is that it just sort of forces you. So I would say, as a sort of, like, I could give you sort of little tips that I use, but as a sort of general philosophy, use this as an opportunity to take ownership of your learning. And that's what you're all grad students. Like, that's what will make you be fantastic graduate students, is being kind of incredibly independent learners, curious. So for instance, if you have your course that you're taking, think carefully in this module that your instructor wants you to do. What do you think he or she wants you to learn? And you don't necessarily have to follow the exact prescription that you follow. Put the pieces together yourself and see how efficiently, as a challenge, you could learn the content that you need to learn. And this sort of even transcends to the kind of in-person classes. But anyways, I would say the one thing that I would kind of always encourage and think about in the online space is taking ownership of your learning. Off to you, Tiana.
How about you, Emmy? What do you see as being some key points in being successful as an online learner?
Yeah, and what my role is maybe a bit different from the other approaches that I'm a student advisor. I try to support the students in being successful online learners. And I think the key ingredient that I see that really create the support network and piece for students is creating community and building community. In the online learning environment, your community is anyone that's active in your learning experience. So that would be your peers, your faculty, support, or even the people that are supporting you at the library or at the online learning writing center. And being proactive and reaching out and building that community is really key for the students. Having that community to rely on when you go through your learning experience, I find is really important. Just as your success as a student, knowing that you have others that are kind of going through the same thing as you do. The individual learning approach is really important, but also how you build your community while you're learning. And maybe that's where it's a big shift for the people or the students that are now going from the face-to-face learning environment and going into the online learning experience, where they don't necessarily feel they have the same community. They can't see their peers, and they have to be a bit more proactive in reaching out to their peers, making sure that they have the support that they need to get through the program. And I think a good kind of overall lesson to remember is that you're all, as students, usually in the program for the same interest, and you want to finish a degree, you want to be a successful learner, you're there to network, build skills. So you have this common interest and bond that you can build on to create that community. So reaching out to your peers and faculty and staff members to help you develop that community through your learning process is key.
All right, so my next question for you, and I think some of you touched on it, so whoever can take this one, we don't need to go through everyone if you don't have anything to add, but how do you keep motivated without the structure of a classroom and a class to go to, say, once a week, or in the case of an intensive class, you're there every day? How do you keep motivated when sometimes it's easy to drift off if you're watching like Zoom or something like that? How do you do that?
I guess I could go. Like every morning, I write it down. I write what my intentions are for the day, why I want to do it. I know it sounds silly. It takes like 5 minutes, but I find this that sort of physical act. I'm like, okay, this is today. This is one of my tasks. I want to go to Zoom. I'm working on a presentation for tomorrow, and I want to do this and have a clear reason why. It kind of feels silly. I've done this for a couple of years now, but just sort of that active writing. Again, I'm going to sort of beat that drum again about intention and sort of being very intentional. I think even that sort of that community thing that Emmy was talking about, it builds once again on engaging with people in a way that intentionally helps you learn. But anyways, and I actually just write it down every day and have a clear goal for the week and for the day. And it's I think probably even more important than ever when you're in your house and you could be distracted. The hardest part about online education is that the tool that you need to use to learn is also your greatest source of distraction. So you have to sort of be very clear with yourself about kind of what you want to accomplish and remind yourself. So sometimes I'll get distracted. Okay, what did I want to accomplish today? Okay, I got it. Anyways, that's my thing.
I think looking at it overall, kind of on, if you're looking at a whole course, that first kind of engagement in a course, especially for students who are going to be starting spring summer now, and it's going to be the first semester where they're actually starting courses online. As you first engage with the course, that can be a really important time to kind of build motivation. I think looking at the syllabus right off the bat, again, Martin was referring to becoming a more independent learner. So actually being really proactive at the beginning of a course, taking a look at the syllabus, what is coming up? What are the timeframes for assignments? What are the types of things I'm being expected to do on a weekly basis, or those types of things? So making sure you've got a really good grasp of that. You're not necessarily having the advantage of going to class every week and someone's going to remind you, okay, this is what's coming up. This is what you need to be doing. So making sure you know right off the bat, what are the expectations, but then also making some expectations for yourself. So if you look at, if you're in a few courses, what are the, the timelines for assignments? Are there times then that I need to focus on, through the semester that I need to focus on doing the other things like the online posts or videos or those types of things, because I'm not as busy with essays or assignments, those types of things. So making a plan for yourself. And again, writing it down, I'm like Martin, I like to have things written down, but what is my schedule that I'm making for myself to make sure that I can get all the pieces done of the courses? And then building a little bit of flex time into that to say, okay, what if something happens? What if someone gets sick? Can I be a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of my plan and getting started, so that if life throws me a curveball, I have a little bit of extra time coming up to the end of the semester to make sure that I can get all these pieces done. So that I find really helpful, and especially then making sure that I'm checking off those check marks for the little things that need to be done on a regular basis, because a big assignment coming up, might be looming overhead, but just keeping track for myself, am I posting to if there are the discussion boards or pieces like that on a regular basis? Am I keeping track and keeping up on those little things too?
Yeah, and I agree very much. It's that taking initiative and being proactive and making that time, I think you invest a fair bit of time in trying to figure out your schedule, and being proactive and scheduling your learning and figuring it out, and even figuring out how you learn the best. I think that's a really key part of it. I think what's I found is really also helpful for the students when they have that community from the beginning of, and being very proactive right from the beginning of, starting off with having study groups right from the beginning, having group chats, communicate with your peers. Is things clear for you? And when things are not clear, you have to be a bit more proactive in reaching out to instructors and the faculty members in the class. The instructors might not be able to read your facial expression online as you're going through the content. So it's really important that you're being vocal. And we've had amazing faculty and instructors that are really willing to help students go through the content if there's questions, but just being a bit more proactive, I think, in that field. And that keeps your motivation going. I think when you feel that you're engaged with your community, you're engaged with your faculty and support, and using all the tools that are there for you.
You would phrase the question too, Tiana, a little bit about, what if you're on a really long Zoom session, and it's hard. You don't necessarily have the same engagement pieces physically. You're not sitting next to your peers. One of the things, this is just kind of out of left field to some extent, but if it works for people, it can be really helpful, is to look at, are you taking notes and how are you taking notes? We know that kind of writing things down physically and handwriting can help retain information and engage you with the course, but also there's some really good resources right now for kind of visual note taking, and learning about, how to make those connections physically on paper. So if you're curious about that, if you do, Emmy said learning how you learn best. So if you are more, you learn better with some of those tactile or visual pieces, just Google, visual note taking, and there's lots of great resources out there, and that can help people that really kind of, sometimes those people who self-identify as struggling with online learning because they like to be more tactile, they like to be more engaged, doing those types of pieces at home while you're in those Zoom sessions or those things can sometimes help it be more embodied for those learners too. So
perfect. Yeah, I brought that up because I had a 3-hour and I had a class that was finishing online, and I had a 3-hour Zoom session. It's very difficult compared to being in the classroom to stay focused, especially if people are dealing with kids or with work or anything else that's going on in their lives. So my next question would be, how do you work in groups? Since lots of students are used to working in a face-to-face format, how do you make the groups work in a distance format?
Yeah, that's a funny question for me. I've seen, I'm always hesitant with group work. It's when I get my reviews back from students, it's either something they love or hate, especially online. And a lot of people want to do online because of the independence. That's actually important to a lot of people, and they don't necessarily want to engage in groups. So from an instructor perspective, it's I try to be very kind of thoughtful about how groups work, but I don't know, like it when I look at the groups that seem to work, this is going to sound like I'm not completely answering the question, but it's just kind of good communication with your group. If there's any issues that come up, deal with it sooner rather than later. It's not like a group in person. Where you can sort of pick up on subtleties where someone's frustrated or someone's like not contributing, and you can sort of like, hey, that's nice that you're going out this weekend. Yeah, we're going to be working on the group project. Yeah, have fun this weekend. And you can sort of tease someone and not fully have to call out somebody to like participate and do those sorts of things. Yeah, it goes back again. You have to be so direct at almost every step of the way with online education. It's like it's a little bit uncomfortable, right? Because you almost feel like you're being a bit rude. But you have to be, a little bit more. Okay, you know what? You probably should have contributed a bit more, and you try to figure out how to do it, or you get really good at writing a diplomatic email with your student, or you have a Zoom call to have a group meeting, but part of the intention is to kind of bring this other student, this group member in that isn't working. So anyways, you don't have the benefit of picking up on the nuances that we're all really good at picking up on in a live group discussion thing. So you have to sort of get comfortable being a little bit uncomfortable in those dynamics. And I've had to kind of manage more than I like sometimes, like those pieces with students. So it is an issue that comes up. I don't want to pretend like everything's fine with it, but I've also had students that they love it. They're like, oh, they're friends with their group, and it's an amazing experience. So yeah.
Yeah, I think in online world, the group work sometimes can be a bit tricky, but I really would like to encourage students to see that as an opportunity to get to know their peers and to network with their peers. This is a great benefit of being in graduate school, to be able to do some group work and get to know your peers. I know for our online students, they really use a lot of different tools to communicate and try to figure out what works best for their group to communicate, and have sessions like we're having right now. So they can actually pick up some of those nuances, potentially seeing each other's face and have dialogue. And I know that they use WhatsApp a fair bit, and even Facebook chat group, like close groups. WebEx and Zoom are available for students as well, or a free account with Zoom. And they actually, after the group work is done, they've actually continued to pursue meeting as a group in a lot of the classes, just because they found it actually very advantageous to go through things and have a dialogue about the content. So it can be a bit hard in the beginning, but there's such big benefits to that group work in the end for the learning experience that I would encourage you to try it out.
Perfect. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I was just going to say, I was thinking the same as Emmy in terms of finding out which type of tools work well for your group to communicate. And then also looking at what are tools that you can use to collaboratively work on your project. So whether that's working, with using Google types of things like Google Docs, or where you can actually be working collaboratively inside of a document at the same time, or kind of switching off back and forth, but actually finding places that can often make group work smoother than, say, emailing a document back and forth and those types of things. So looking at what are those pieces of software that can help you work collaboratively as well.
A kind of final thought I had. So the context is a bit different now. Everybody's in their house. everyone's going to be desperate for social interaction. So it's probably and I've had a few experiences with this. For instance, I have some colleagues that I've asked, you know, oh, let's have like a Friday sort of beer chat on Zoom, and everyone's like, oh yeah, this is a great idea. Like I never would have done that before, and they probably would have got laughed at before. But there's probably just sort of instigating those opportunities is probably easier than ever, because everyone. What's unique about this particular situation is that everyone's in their house. Everyone is either already or very soon going to be really wanting some social interaction. So that could be, might kill two birds with one stone, where you get your group work done, and then it's kind of important for most people to kind of interact. So then you're able to do that. And for me, I've been a little bit uncomfortable the last couple of weeks. I've been trying to call people more and have Zoom chats with people more, but people are very receptive to it, and sort of be comfortable being that person that kind of instigates that, because I think that those social norms have shifted for the time being.
Perfect. Are there any questions from the students on the call? Anything you're curious to ask about?
I'll jump on here because everyone knows I always have questions. Will there be, you talked about this is first of many of these webinars coming on. Will there be any kind of webinars or thoughts of doing some, here's some tutorials on how best to use Google Documents, et cetera, or other things that are out there? I will be the first one to say that I am not the most savvy on technology, but I've had the steep learning curve. So just wondering if there's going to be any support for students in that way.
That's a great question. I don't think well, I'm pretty sure we haven't discussed that directly yet. Martin had put together some tutorials in terms of using Zoom and a couple of other pieces, more for staff and faculty, but that's a great suggestion, Amanda. I mean, others can speak to it if you know that there's more specific ones out there. We can certainly share some existing resources, but we could also look at if there's an interest for that, doing kind of something similar that's a little bit of a primer about, more specifically about, here, look how you can use these different pieces of software. So anyone else? I'm gonna jump in there.
I would agree with that. Like Justin Longo would probably be a very good person that maybe we could have on, because I know he makes very good use of Google Docs and stuff like that in his class, and I know yeah, Google Docs is amazing. So, and I'm sure I don't even know all the capabilities of them, but yeah, we can definitely, if you think that would be helpful to students, I think that's something we can certainly look into, and even do a similar format to this, if students are interested.
I'll also pose the question out to, we have our chat tomorrow evening with students, so I'll pose that to anybody that joins that as well. So I can get back to whoever.
That'd be great. Any other questions? We have Anastasia on, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you have anything you want to add. You're getting radio silence. So anything else you want to talk? I think, like I've done online courses before versus in classroom, and I actually do prefer in classroom versus online. So I'm the bit of opposite of Martin, but so what I find with online courses is I don't have as good retention of the material as I would in an in-classroom, because I feel like the questions and the discussion in the in-classroom forum reinforce the concepts a little bit better for me. So how do you overcome that retention piece and that lack of discussion you can sometimes get in the online classroom?
Yeah, I think that's the greatest weakness of an online class, is a good kind of group chat with other people face to face. Zoom's good, but a in-person group chat is better. But I think there's all kinds of other ways you can learn, and unfortunately we're stuck with those options for the time being. The way I sort of think about it, though, as this is going to sound sort of cold, it's going to sound sort of weird. I think when I learn something new now, like I think how fast could I possibly learn it? If I think about the time needed, how fast could I possibly learn? The driving time to get to class, the time it takes to kind of, the gap times in between the start of a class and an end of a class. All those things matter, and that's the sort of part where I think I can learn better. That includes that part. I don't pretend that I don't find, like, I love talking. Like, I think that's pretty obvious. I love having discussions with people face to face, and this isolation thing is like torture for someone like me. But if I'm thinking just from a learning perspective and how fast I can learn, I would much rather not go to class, potentially take an online class, focus like a laser at the sort of outcomes that I want, and then just and go if it's time that I'm thinking about in terms of learning. I need to learn statistics. I can learn it and spend much less time online if you consider all the little pieces that are involved in an in-person class. And that's where I sort of see that as an online class. And then the other thing I would add is that you haven't taken a good online class yet.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I would say too, in that piece, if you are a person who learns primarily, yeah, so if you're a person who learns a lot from interaction, look for those opportunities in those online classes. Like Emmy was saying, can you set up a study group with a couple other people in your class and just chat about the week's concepts afterwards? Are there discussion boards, and are you making the best use of those? Like, are you just going in there and, putting in a response just because you have to get it done? Or are you actually looking for those topics that you're having trouble understanding and trying to engage in a back and forth about them, those types of things? So just using those tools, they may not be the ones that work as well for you as in person, but can you make those connections? And certainly being comfortable approaching your professor. Emmy was I was getting at this before, making those connections and having some of that back and forth. Sometimes when you're online, it feels like that instructor's kind of further away or less accessible. So kind of getting over that hump and reaching out and having conversations if there's something you're struggling with.
And I would say from the instructor perspective, you sort of experience that same sort of isolation when you're teaching to the abyss. You're providing content, you're recording a lecture and just goes somewhere. You're writing all this stuff and you have and Emmy knows this, I'm always desperate for student feedback. When students like, oh, can we? When I have a student that wants to call me to chat about something, I welcome it. Yeah. It's sort of, it's sort of this necessary information. I think that's consistent with other online instructors, because you want to know what works and you want to know what doesn't work. You want to you do want to get to know your students, and sometimes there's that. So yeah, so I'm always excited when students are not when they all do it at the same time at the end of the term, but if it's sprinkled out, respectful of my time, it's amazing.
Yeah, I think the piece that I hear when you say highlighted that difficulty is actually that missing piece, the community piece, that I see is so important to have in the online, just for your experience and for kind of how you're going to go through the material, and having a community you can have those informal conversation and discussion and a feel of how you're going through the class. And that's the tricky part in the online learning, is that you have to be very proactive in creating that environment for yourself. And especially if you know that it's something that you really need when you're in a learning environment, is that you need community. Then you have to be much more proactive in creating that. And there's the formal learning communities that are within the class, the discussion groups and the study groups, the emails that you can use. But if you also kind of want more of that informal piece, then it's that you have to push yourself even more to be proactive in reaching out to students. But what students are in the same boat. They're going through the same hurdles, and I think even recognizing that, not being afraid of reaching out, is really important, because students are going through a lot of the same learning curves. So it's really great to reach out to others. And yeah, I'll just plug it in again that the instructors or faculty at JSGS are really open for dialogue and discussion. Not only Martin, but across the board, instructors they love getting feedback, they love having conversations, and they feel the same way a lot of times, that the students, they want feedback. And it's great when the students reach out too.
Great.
We also have a little video to share. And so we have, as I mentioned, we have a bigger online student group. We actually have a third of our students are already online. And when they heard about some of the kind of the questions and challenges that our on-campus students were having, they want to send some advice to you.
I'm an online MPA student doing full-time online education since last September 2019, and I've really noticed studying and working online, I've been able to improve my use of technology in communication and collaboration with others. And been able to learn with others with video meetings, online chat, discussion forums, and email communication, which I think are great skills to take to any employer after graduation.
I chose to do my MPA online because I work full-time, and because of this, I needed a program that offers some flexibility. At first, I was really nervous about being fully online because it definitely requires some more discipline and time management, and I was mostly worried about feeling isolated. But I found that the faculty were incredibly supportive, and that really helped me get through my first semester online. Anytime I had any questions or concerns, they were able to put my mind at ease and help me navigate through learning online.
Good morning. This is Gail Milcher-Clark. I'm in the Genie program right now working on my thesis. Just want to give you guys some pointers on studying at home, get into a routine. Do the same thing you would be doing when you go to class. Get up in the morning, do what you need to do, but use that time at home to study. Make time with your profs, do some one-on-ones with them, interact with your classmates, use Skype, use WebEx, use TeamViewer, whatever it takes, but maintain that connection. Utilize IT. They have some really good programs there. Utilize the library. A lot of the things can be accessed online. If you need a book in that, I'm sure you can work on something with the library. But be creative. Basically, be creative in what you're doing at home and maintain a routine. Very important. Take care. Have yourselves an amazing time at home, and good luck.
That was great, and I think it reiterated kind of you know, what we touched on in this chat, right from the people who are in it right now and being online learners. So I think that's really helpful. I don't have any other real questions. I think we've touched on a lot here. Is there anything else anyone wants to add to the conversation?
I've discovered a little tip for if people that are now learning from home who have kids. And part of the issue now is that everybody's kids are at home and homeschooling as well. So I had my kids make a stop sign that I put on the door if I need them to stay out. And I think they respect it more because they made it. So that's my tip. Get your kids to make the sign that tells them to stay, to respect your study time, because it's not always foolproof, but it's coming from them. So so that's a challenge some people face, is having to now navigate your studies with your kids at home. I see Tiana is nodding. She's working from home and studying from home, and she's got 3 little kids at home. So trying to work out those times when your kids are napping or in the evening or whatever works best. But to try and carve those times out to get some work in that way.
That's a great advice. I'm totally going to do that later. That's great.
It can be a challenge, that's for sure.
Yeah, I usually have somebody standing right behind me or jumping on our bed behind us. So I think that's a great advice. And I think just be kind to yourself right now. There's a lot of things that are shifting. There's a lot of things that are unknown, and just being kind to yourself as you're going through kind of this learning curve of learning online. And reaching out if you feel lost to your student advisors, but your team at JSGS that has experience in online learning. We're all very open for any conversations or talk if you want to have those. And just, yeah, have a bit of fun too. The online learning platform is a lot of fun. You can really seek out a lot of voices and videos and be very proactive in your own learning, which is a lot of fun.
I had a bit of a thought after Jamie's comment with the kids. One of the things I've observed with students is that they're often, many times, they're often very they'll not want to have a meeting with me because they're afraid that their kid will interrupt the conversation. Or if we have a Zoom call, I've had some students tell me, like, oh, well, I can't go this time because, you know, my kid might wake up and things like that. And I've had to sort of assure them, like, no, this is fine. We can work around your crying baby while we're chatting about something. You can put yourself on mute if we're having a Zoom call. So with the kid thing, I think there's, especially now, like, you would have to be like, instructors, I can't imagine an instructor not being open to you going to a Zoom lecture and having your kid on your lap, or having some distractions here and there. So it's, I guess, a bit of kind of what Emmy was saying, be kind to yourself. And I think there's you know, so a lot more kind of flexibility with these things. We're getting someone on the chat. Yeah. But anyways, that was my thought about kids, and I've had it like over and over again that students are really shy about they're like, oh, well, I can't meet at this time because of my kid. I'm like, oh, like, why not? Just come. We can have a chat. It's not a big deal if we get distracted a little bit. So yeah. So anyways, those expectations, I think can be shifted a bit.
I think a final reminder too, and this was coming from the student video, it was helpful, is that there are a lot of resources for online students in terms of being able to access the university's resources that we would normally think about accessing in person. And certainly now with our COVID situation, all of the university's resources are shifting more and more to be focused online. So again, go to the library's website, check out what things have changed. Because I know in the last couple of weeks, things have changed in terms of the length of time you can borrow books, and how you can access things by distance, and how you can access a lot of the books now. You can access e-versions and those types of things, right? So don't assume because you're at home, you don't have access to a lot of the services you would normally have. IT, all learning supports, mental health supports, all of those things have either, you know, been available for online students for a long time and or are increasingly shifting online. So really seek out online resources in those other areas as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think just sort of tell us what you need. I think for me, and I think I can speak for the group, that everybody on the sort of administrative and faculty side is sort of desperate to know what the gaps are, what the need is, and I think there's a lot of willingness to try to accommodate, work around, or just be made aware of. This is sort of unprecedented for everybody. So that if there is something that if it's faculty or staff that need to be made aware of, I think it will fall on very kind of an open mind and ears for some of those ideas.
Yeah, and Amanda, specifically, as you're having that chat, feel free to get information from students about what they would like in terms of topics for these sessions, or if there's other stuff they want to know about learning online or resources or whatever the case may be. I think your suggestion around specific types of technology is really great, but if there's other things that you can gather from students, that would be awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hope to use those Wednesday evening chats with students as a little bit of that, to find out what it is that they're concerned about, or what they're thinking about, or what questions they have, to help to bring it back to whoever needs it, in the faculty and with the staff, as well as anybody here, to say, this is where I think we're going with things. So.
Perfect. Well, thanks everyone for coming today and listening. We'll make this available online for anyone else who couldn't come. But of course, as Martin said, like, we are constantly looking for feedback, what's working, what's not working. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us outside of these Zoom chats or whatever we're holding, and giving that feedback, because we can't make it better if we don't know the issues. So again, appreciate you all adapting so quickly to the changes that have happened. You know, it wasn't easy. There's lots of factors at play. People are parents, people may have lost their jobs, all of that. So we really appreciate, we know there's more going on than just adapting to online learning. So I think everyone's really risen to the challenge, and it's been great. So once again, thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.